At 04:31 hours local time, a Ukrainian warhead punched through the side of a fuel tanker sitting stalled on an open stretch of Russian track, and the tanker came apart in a single rising column of fire that lit the whole train from end to end. The blaze threw black smoke flat across the rails and became the brightest thing in the dark for miles. A pillar of flame witnesses would later put at roughly 200 feet. The train had been running 53 miles behind the front line, deep in what its crew believed was safe rear. Each drone that killed it cost a little over $100,000. The air defense corridor built to protect that train, radars, missile batteries, electronic warfare masts, was worth tens of millions. Not one of those systems had to be destroyed for the trap to close. They only had to be aimed the wrong way. To understand how a $100,000 drone unmade a corridor worth 40 times as much, start with the bridge. Nothing dramatic to look at. 2 railway lines carried across a river on a single span. But it was the throat of the whole route, the one structural point through which Russian fuel, ammunition, and men moved between 2 occupied regions. Cut it, and everything behind it stops. The Russians had defended it accordingly. Layered air defense, a low-altitude radar net, a curtain of jamming across the satellite navigation bands. On paper, a good hard shell. The weapon sent against it was the UJ-26 Beaver, a Ukrainian long-range strike drone with the wingspan of a small light plane, built to fly hundreds of miles on a course loaded before takeoff and drive a 44-pound warhead into whatever waits at the end. As strike weapons go, it is cheap. 14 were in the air over the corridor that night, and they had not come as a swarm aimed at a single point. They had come as a machine with moving parts, split 3 ways, no 2 groups sent at the same thing. One group would draw the guns. One would drop the bridge and freeze the train in the open. One would be held back, circling in the dark, for a target that did not exist yet. Because the first 4 drones over the corridor were not built to destroy anything at all. Their entire mission was to be seen, to be shot at, to die. They came in low and slow from 2 different bearings, making no effort to hide. That was the point. A drone trying to slip through wants to stay invisible. These 4 wanted every radar in the corridor to wake up, lock on, and open fire. Because a radar that is shooting is a radar that has told you exactly where it is. The first system to bite was a Kosta 2E2, a Russian low-altitude surveillance radar built to catch precisely this kind of threat. On paper, it reaches 150 miles. Against a Beaver hugging the terrain, that number fell apart. The drone flew low enough that the curve of the earth and the clutter of the ground swallowed most of the radar's reach, and its usable detection collapsed to around 22 miles. Even inside that, the contacts flickered, appearing, vanishing, smearing into the ground return, reappearing where they shouldn't be. The Kosta could tell the batteries something was coming. It could not tell them cleanly how many, along which line, or how fast. And that is a different failure than being blind. Think of a smoke detector that shrieks every time you make toast. It is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. But after the 3rd false alarm, you stop trusting it, and when the real fire comes, you are already halfway to ignoring it. The Kosta was screaming a warning the crews could not act on. A warning you cannot turn into a firing solution is not intelligence. It is just noise with a direction attached. The kinetic answer to that noise was a Tor M2, a tracked short-range missile system that hunts low, slow targets for a living. Its radar found the first wave at the edge of 9 miles. A Tor engages 4 targets at once. The first wave was 4 drones. 4 against 4 is a fight the Tor wins. And it did. It killed 2 outright. A Pantsir S-1 nearby, a gun and missile system covering the short-range gap the Tor leaves behind, took a 3rd. The 4th lost its satellite fix inside the jamming and wandered off, coming down in an empty field with a dull thud. 3 drones dead, 1 drifted off, and every Russian crew in that corridor now believed they were winning. Screens clean, kill count climbing, radars all pointed confidently at the bearing the first wave had come from, an axis that had already done its only job. The bait had cost Ukraine 4 drones and bought exactly what it was sent to buy, a corridor full of defenders looking hard in the wrong direction. But the drone that wandered off had been knocked down by jamming, and that jamming was Russian, which meant the Russians had just proven their electronic warfare net worked right before it failed against everything that came next. Here is what they did not understand about the drone they had just knocked down. It had not been stopped. It had been nudged. The jamming came from a Pole 21 network, a web of electronic warfare emitters bolted to towers and masts across the corridor, flooding the satellite navigation bands with noise. It was built to blind drones, and it did degrade them. Strip a drone of its satellite fix and it loses the precise, constantly corrected sense of where it is. But a Beaver does not fall out of the sky when that happens. It carries an inertial navigation system, a self-contained mechanism that holds a heading by measuring its own motion, needing no signal from space. Blind the satellite link and the drone keeps flying the course it already knew, a little less accurate, just as alive. The Pole 21 could make a Beaver miss by a few yards. It could not make it stop. Think of a driver who has memorized the route home. Take away the phone in the dashboard and the turn-by-turn voice, and he does not roll to a halt in the road. He drives on memory. He might overshoot the driveway by a house or two, but he arrives. The Pole 21 took away the navigation voice. The Beavers drove home from memory. That distinction, degraded versus stopped, was about to cost the Russians the bridge because they had spent the whole first wave learning the wrong lesson from it. 150 seconds after the bait, the second wave arrived. 6 Beavers, and every one of them was for the bridge. Now the arithmetic that had won the first fight turned against the defenders. A Tor engages 4 targets at once, but each channel has to lock, fire, and confirm before it moves to the next. The Pantsir works the same way. Against 4 spaced-out drones, that cycle is fast enough. Against 6 arriving together, seconds apart, spread across the length of the span, it is a bottleneck. Every channel was still cluttered with the fading ghosts of the first wave. There was never enough time to work through all 6. They knocked down 2, 4 got through, and one of those 4 had been caught by the Pole 21 on the way in, its satellite fix gone, running blind on inertial memory alone. It flew the last stretch anyway and came down on the span regardless, less precisely, just as hard. 4 warheads landing along the same bridge in a few seconds were enough. One rail line took a hit directly over a support pier and dropped, deck and track together, into the river gap below. The second, a few yards away, was not severed but wrenched out of true, rails twisted, the bed torn open. A span still standing and good for nothing. Where the crossing had been, a tower of fire and smoke climbed off the river into the dark. 15 miles up the line, the driver of the supply train saw it. A glow on the horizon, low, exactly where the bridge should have been, and growing, because he was still running toward it at speed. The bridge was gone, but the train was not, and the last 4 Beavers had not even shown themselves yet. The driver threw the train into emergency braking. It did not stop, not quickly. A loaded freight train at nearly 40 miles an hour does not halt because the man at the controls decides it should. It stops when its own weight runs out of momentum, and that takes distance. Nearly 15 seconds passed before the full braking effort took hold, and in those seconds the train rolled another 800 feet closer to the fire. Then the long grind, steel on steel, more than half a mile of it, sparks peeling off the wheels the whole way down. This was the other half of what the bridge had been for. Drop a crossing in front of a train this heavy and you take away every choice it has. It cannot stop in time. It cannot turn. It cannot reverse fast enough to matter. It can only grind to a halt in the open and sit there, exposed, in a place no one chose for it. The train stopped in bare country more than 2.5 miles short of the burning bridge, dead still, unable to move. And that was the moment the trap had actually been built for, because 4 Beavers had never gone near the corridor. While the bait died and the bridge fell, they had flown a longer, looping route and were now holding roughly 11 miles out, circling, waiting for one thing: a word from a spotter that the train had stopped. A moving train under braking is a hard, shifting aim point. A stopped train is a map. Holding those 4 back had been a gamble. 4 aircraft burning the fuel and time they would need at the end, betting a wrecked bridge would strand the train somewhere they could still reach it. If it had halted short and backed away down the line behind it, the reserve would have been 4 drones with no target and no range left to find another. At 04:24 hours, the train finished stopping. In a tree line behind the rails, a Ukrainian spotter read it through a thermal scope, 1 car at a time. Under the scope, the stopped train was a line of shapes, slowly bleeding heat into the night. All cooling, all going dark. All but one. A tank of liquid fuel sheds heat more slowly than an empty boxcar, and a tanker near the middle still glowed warm while the cars around it faded to gray. Behind it rode a covered wagon, low and heavy on its springs, loaded with whatever a combined fuel and ammunition run carries. Heavy and close to the fuel. That was all the spotter needed. He passed the word, and 11 miles out, the last 4 Beavers turned in. For 6 minutes, nothing chased them. The corridor's defenses were 2.5 miles away, still faced toward a bridge that was already gone. And a Tor or a Panzer does not fight on the move. To engage, it has to stop, level itself, bring its radar up, and acquire from scratch. Minutes, not seconds. The batteries that had spent the raid, pointed at the bridge, now had to tear across open ground to the stopped train and set up all over again. The drones were faster than any of that. Only 1 Panzer tore free in time to matter. It did its job. It picked up the incoming drones, took its shot, and knocked the first of the 4 down short of the train. Then its own success turned against it. The train had stopped, its crew had climbed down. Now there were men on the ground, and directly behind the drones the Panzer wanted to kill sat a tanker full of fuel and a wagon full of munitions. The Beavers were coming in under 60 feet off the ground, which meant the only shot the Panzer's 30mm cannon had was flat and level, straight through its own dismounted crew and into the fuel behind them. The safe firing lanes narrowed to almost nothing. A guard caught a drone in his sights inside the last quarter mile and fired. But a quarter mile is about 9 seconds at Beaver speed, and 9 seconds is not enough for a man with a rifle to solve a moving target in the dark. It kept coming. 3 drones now, 3 targets, no more missiles that could safely fly. At 04:31 hours, the first went into the locomotive. The warhead punched through the cab and into the drive beneath it, and in that instant, the engine simply stopped being an engine. The thing that had pulled the train into the box would never pull anything again. The second went into the fuel tanker. A breech tank of fuel does not burn slowly. The warhead opened it, the fuel found air and ignition in the same instant, and the tanker went up in that single rising column of fire that lit the whole train from end to end. And for the last Beaver still flying, that fire stopped being a fire and became a beacon. It no longer needed a targeting solution. It steered for the light, into the covered wagon the spotter had marked, and whatever that wagon carried answered with a deeper, rolling crackle of its own. Secondary detonations walking through the train long after the drone that started them was gone. Militarily, the accounting is stark. A locomotive dead on the rails. A fuel tanker burned out, a munitions wagon torn open, 2 railway lines cut, and a span dropped into a river. And on the Ukrainian side, the cost was the drones themselves, a little over $100,000 apiece, against a Costa, a Tor, and a Panzer, each worth tens of millions, none of which had to be destroyed to be beaten. They only had to be outnumbered on the channels that mattered and pointed the wrong way at the decisive moment. Strategically, the damage runs past the wreck. A key logistics artery between 2 occupied regions was severed in a single night. Not just the bridge, but the crews, the schedule, the confidence that the deep rear was deep enough. The corridor did not lose because its defenses were weak. It lost because the 7 drones that mattered were never thrown at its strongest wall. Everything the Russians shot down, they were meant to shoot down. The raid was not a swarm that got lucky. It was a box, built 1 wall at a time. Bait to pull the guns aside, warheads to drop the bridge and freeze the train in the open. A reserve held in the dark to kill the thing once it could no longer run. Somewhere along that same stretch of rear, tonight, another bridge is still standing and another train is still running. Safe, for now, only because nothing has reached them yet. That is the uncomfortable lesson in the wreckage. The box gets built before anyone inside it knows they are in one. If this showed you something the headline skipped, Subscribe, we break down one of these operations every week. And tell me in the comments, when a drone that costs less than a used car beats a corridor worth tens of millions, what is really being destroyed? The hardware, or the belief that the rear is safe?